now live. A very warm welcome to all of you for the BTOPEX BFSI live webinar. The theme for this webinar today is unlocking the future of BFSI with innovation, transformation, and customer experience, and understanding the innovation within the startup industry in BFSI. I'm thrilled to see such a passionate group of people who have registered for this webinar already. And if you have not, you can still register and watch at a later stage. I'm sure you all are aware that the BFSI landscape is evolving at a breakneck speed with new technologies, changing customer expectations, and a dynamic regulatory environment demand constant adaptation. Today's session is designed to equip you with the tools and strategies to navigate these changes and emerge as a leader in the future of BFSI. We have a phenomenal lineup of speakers lined up to share their expertise, and they'll delve into the DNA of successful BFSI startups, unveil groundbreaking methods for driving innovation within your insurance operations, and also provide actionable insights on harnessing digital transformation to deliver seamless end-to-end customer experience. So remember to interact with our speakers even after the event is over, when they're live on YouTube, or you're watching this in the night in your home or wherever you are. You can connect with them on LinkedIn and ask any question that you may have. We encourage you to actively participate and utilize this platform to network with the experts that we have gathered here today. Also, for the live audience, feel free to type your questions in the Q&A chat option that you see on your screen. And throughout the presentation, we'll make a note of these questions and we'll answer them after the presentation is over. We have a dedicated Q&A session, so please shoot your questions and we'll be more than happy to answer them. Today, we start off our session for the day for BFSI for this year with an excellent speaker who has a vast knowledge in the banking and finance industry. Please join me in welcoming Rupesh Goel, who is the thought leader and advocate for the power of startups to transform industries and communities. He's the managing director with Silicon Valley Bank in India. He leads their credit administration practice, and he's also recognized for his invaluable contribution to the startup ecosystem. As a dedicated expert, mentor, and advisor, he has guided numerous emerging entrepreneurs through the challenges of early stage development. Beyond individual mentorship, Rupesh plays an active role in startup community by helping connect both the founders and the investors. And as a regular speaker at industry events, Rupesh shares insights on startup ecosystem, innovation, and investment. And before joining SVB, Rupesh held position as Senior Vice President of Credit Services at HSBC, where he led the corporate and commercial credit services function, supporting 28 countries. Now, that's an impressive profile, my friend, my dear listeners. He was managing a team of over 1,100 employees across India, China, Poland, and Egypt. He was responsible for the strategy planning, budgeting, service delivery, operations, technical innovations, process improvements, cost optimization, stakeholder management, and team leadership. Now, that's too many feathers on that cap right there. So I can assure you, you're speaking or you're listening to the right person who has wealth of knowledge to share with us. He also spearheaded various activities related to financial spreading, credit analysis, covenant monitoring, facility and collateral documentation, collateral management, and post-approval credit administration. Before his tenure at HSBC, he also gained valuable experience with Barclays, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, ICICI, and HDFC. Please join me in welcoming Rupesh, who is also a Six Sigma Black Belt professional and a global business leader, with today's topic on the innovation within the startup ecosystem. Very warm welcome to you, Rupesh. I can go on and talk about your profile, and there's just so much to say. I think it does not do justice with such a short span of time. A very warm welcome. I leave the stage to you to enlighten our audience and everyone who will be listening to us after this recorded session. Over to you, Rupesh.
Thank you very much for that really glowing intro. I'm not sure if I deserve all of that, but thank you very much, for that intro. I really, really like that, and some of it, of course, rejogged my memory as well. But thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be addressing and speaking to your esteemed audience. And again, as was called out earlier, if there are any questions, conversation, discussions, we can do it towards the end of this short talk through the Q&A, or even outside of this conference. I'll be more than happy to connect wherever I can add value. I think the theme is on the BFSI, right? And one of the things that when we spoke about it, one of the things was there is a huge interest in the market about entrepreneurship, right? People wanting to do their own stuff, starting their startup, predominantly focused on fintech, insurtech, loan tech, whatever you call it, in different avatars. And we thought this would be a good topic to sort of talk about in terms of what makes a startup successful. And I know this is a very dangerous topic in the sense that there is no standard recipe. Just like a movie, right? So you can't have a formula for a successful movie. There are a lot of ingredients that go in, which decides what makes a movie successful. And more often than not, people are not able to even fathom what would make it successful, even while they are in that stage of starting a startup or standing that whole idea and team, right? But basis my experience interacting with a lot of startups, VCs, and PE firms, the idea was in this session I'll talk about some of the stuff that I have seen, witnessed, or even heard from the fellow ecosystem players across all of these spaces, both in India, US, and other spaces. So this is more of a session where I talk about what my observation learnings are. And then, of course, what I would prefer doing towards the end is, of course, more of a conversation and a discussion. Something that I'm sharing is not necessarily, as I said, right, the final sort of a recipe for success, but these are some of the attributes that are noticed in this ecosystem. So that is really what is the intent of this. You may or may not agree with some or most of the attributes that we sort of talk about in next 15-20 minutes, but it's more about having conversations about that stuff and see what is it that works for you. Now, you could be a founder who has had been a startup for almost a year. You could be someone who is toying with the idea and saying, hey, should I make this jump now or not? Right? You could be a serial entrepreneur where you have had a couple of successful startups, you exited or you sold it off, and you're now starting with your next one. Or you could be just purely an investor in either a personal capacity through an angel or established VC or a PE player. I think you would like what you would see in the marketplace, and that's what I intend to talk about. And my apologies, I'm talking through the phone for some reason. My laptop decided not to help me through the conference. So I hope still coming it all right. But again, if not, then apologies in advance if my either a video or an audio is not up to the mark. With those opening comments, let me dive into this, right? So as I said, attributes of a successful startup is what we're going to talk about. I think some of the firms that you see on the opening slide sort of depicts it, right? It's nice and beautiful and all of it, but it's also has thorns around it, right? So therefore, it isn't an easy journey. As they say, I think startups is is not about someone who is weak at heart, right? So you've got to have a really strong heart to be able to get into a startup, because a person who runs a startup, who works in a startup, will undergo multiple emotions during the day, during the week, and during the month. The life cycle is very different versus working in a large corporate, for example. Could I request to move on to the next slide, please? All right, and this is generally the theme in my talk. I'm not gonna throw a lot of words at you. Of course, at least just one slide, which is slightly busier, but the other is fairly light, not much to read, but it's more to invoke a thought and provide food for thought for someone who's sort of delving into this space. And one of the things, right, and this is in a way contrary to this whole presentation, right? I'm talking about attributes of a successful startup, but I'm also saying there is no success recipe. Something that we have spoken about, or I have touched upon earlier, there is no standard set of ingredients that if you do those 10 things, you will have a successful startup. However, having those attributes or those ingredients will substantially increase the chances of the startup being successful. And why I say this is an ever growing and ever shrinking list, because the people who are in this ecosystem will on a regular basis interact, and they will keep adding or striking things off that list. So therefore, one of the things which is extremely important for someone who wants to get into this space or is already into this space is networking. And you will see this theme right across my talk, is that networking is extremely crucial, and I can't stress on that more enough in terms of being successful in this space. I know there are some concerns about, hey, what if I share my idea with a large group of people? Would somebody take it away and stuff like that? And some of those concerns are not completely out of sync. So it's all right to be a little skeptical on that. However, this shouldn't mean that you are not networking, because in this space, when you network with fellow founders, what you understand is some of the challenges that the market is facing, some of the stuff which is happening in the space that you need to pivot around, similarly interacting with investors, investing community, even if they are not directly investors or intend to invest in your company or industry, but having insights from those group of people is extremely valuable, right? So which is why I say there is no success recipe, but of course, this list is ever changing. And one of the first things that come into the list, and something which isn't majorly disputed, something that most of the ecosystem players agree, is the first thing that a startup needs to work out is a market need. And if you could just move on to the next slide, please. Market need is extremely important in terms of figuring out. The next slide, please. All right. All right, here it is. Thank you very much. The market need is extremely important in the sense, so you can call it something in terms of, hey, this is an idea which solves a problem, right? Or this is something which is long awaited demand from the market, and this idea or this startup is something which is fulfilling that need. This could be a need which even the market, consumers, etc., are not even aware of, right? So when you bring that idea, there might not be a lot of enthusiasm initially, but because that need is not even identified till that point, right? But when you get into the market, you would see that this is a latent need, and therefore it sort of excites people over a period of time. So the broad thing is market need is the critical part to a startup or setting up of a startup. If it is one of the many already pre-existing solutions which are already out there in the market, then there is no major differentiation between that startup and all other companies, right? Then some of the innovations are in terms of your business model, what you could do differently, or your execution stroke pricing. But we'll come to that in a short while. I think from a market needs standpoint, I've just listed those 3 or 4 aspects, right? The first is, of course, disruptive innovation. All amongst us are very well aware of the companies which has done this disruptive innovation, starting with Uber and others, right? So this was a need which was in the market, but of course nobody sort of thought about how to resolve that need from a market standpoint. And this was truly global. So this came up with a disruptive innovation, and there are many such examples of that, right? Then there could be underserved markets as well, right? Markets which nobody is paying attention to for whatever reason, right? These could be, you could call your niche markets, which people are not necessarily paying attention to, right? But something that you feel there is a need, because while there is a small group whose need is not being catered to or addressed, and therefore would happy to pay a premium because no one else is catering to them, right? So you could look at that as an underserved market. One of the things which potentially stands out very clearly on this as an example is something which Jeevansathi.com is doing. They are doing some elite matrimony, right? So this is they are addressing a certain set of strata and saying, okay, we will connect you with the like-minded families, groups, backgrounds, etc., so that you within that small community, we will figure out a way to sort of network you and figure out the right matrimony alliances and stuff like that, right? So that you could say that is an example of an underserved market, excuse me. Those, again, these 3 or 4 that I've listed here are just a few examples. There could be more ways that you could address a market need, but broadly speaking, if you take startups that has happened in last 10, 15 years and are happening now, you would be able to place those startups in one of these 4 categories. Some may be in one of more than one category, but broadly this. There could be a 5th one, that might be a better description, but these are the ones that I could sort of think about in terms of placing the startups. And why it is important to know which of these 4 buckets you fall into, or your idea fall into, or your startup, because these will also decide your future business model, pricing strategy, and go-to-market strategy. And it's important to know that where your startup or your idea lies versus trying to be fitting on all of these, right? It's very difficult to do it right at the start for sure. So start with a market need and one of the buckets, and then sort of work towards it, right? So a business model innovation is something where the need is there, the solution is there, but the way you are approaching it is extremely different than what market has done in the past, right? Or the other players have done in the past. So once you know which category you lie in, it becomes sort of easier to then sort of work on a business model. And this is extremely critical for startups. Primarily because there are limited resources, definitely in the initial years or journey of the startup, and it'll be quite detrimental if they try to be all of these, right? So it's good to start with one of these and then sort of delve into that. The next part of this, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. Is what I call passion in people. And I put them in the same category. We'll wait for the slide to come up. I think it takes one quick second. Vinayak, next slide, please. Thank you. This is the next extremely important attribute is passion in people, and I've placed both of them sort of together. Passion in the founder or co-founders is extremely important. Why? Because they'll go through a substantial emotional journey every day, every week, and every month, as I said earlier. So you want the person to still have passion and enthusiasm about their idea and the solution that they are bringing to the market, rather getting pretty phased by the failures or not achieving success or hearing no's, right? You'll see a founder or co-founder speaking to multiple investors, and a lot of them would say no, but this person should still walk out of that room, still having the previous slide, Vinayak. Thank you. Yeah, would still walk out of the room having held high. They shouldn't feel discouraged by that, as an example, right? So that passion of the founder or that leadership is extremely important. The other thing which I have noticed a lot is having a great set of team along with the founder, right? Because a co-founder, let's think of a technology related solution, right? There is a heavy technology input. The founder is a great technologist. But hey, what I found very changes into, excuse me, very quickly, that founder is not able to spend a lot of time on technology innovation, but becomes more of a salesperson, right? Salesperson in terms of investors, in terms of potential customers, either B2B or B2C, and so on and so forth. So that person will have to delve into more of selling, more of projecting their company and all of that, whereas others sort of do that stuff, right? I've very rarely seen founders or startups being extremely successful if they give away this task of helping the company get projected, whether through a sales or other, to someone else. So they have to do it themselves, primarily because of their passion and how that idea came into being. Why I'm narrating this as an instance is therefore people becomes important. A founder can't expect to do all. Therefore, they would need to have either a very strong co-founder who is good at a very different skill set, which the primary founder has, for example, or they pick up a set of key players, right? Whether the CEOs or chief of staff or CFOs who are good at that specific stuff, and then the founders and the co-founders focus on their skill sets and their requirement of the requirement of the startup rather than that specific need. So therefore, the people is extremely important. I have seen very successful startups not be initial great ideas not being successful in the later stages is primarily because what they lacked was a winning team. A founder or a set of co-founders can only achieve so much. It's extremely important for them to have the set of people or set of team around them who are almost equally passionate, and they sort of take their specific set of roles very seriously, and they sort of take that element out of the founder's reach. I spoke about networking. Again, it's extremely important in this space to continue to network. You would if you are a startup player already, or if you're getting into it, you will see a lot of mixers, a lot of events to bring the whole set of ecosystem players participating, and primarily it's because of this networking. You would see a huge amount of benefit, and there are very successful examples, whether you look at YC, Y Combinator in the Silicon Valley, you look at SAS Boomi, Chennai, all of those are really successful examples of how, a strong networking and learning from the peers, learning from the other ecosystem players who are founders, who want to be founders, who've been erstwhile founders or investors. All of that is extremely important, so that you're not reinventing the wheel. You're rather focusing on stuff to ensure that, one, you're not making that mistake, but you're rather focusing on the more positive part of it. I'll take a very quick pause to see, do we need to get into questions now, or do I still have about 5-6 minutes before I finish my talk?
Rupesh, I think you can continue.
Right, fabulous. Thank you very much. The next slide, please. The next is on the business model. Just like finding the need, which was the first step, then making sure that you have the right set of founders and co-founders and focusing on the right stuff or important stuff, and you having the right team is also the whole business model around it, right? And the picture that I have got here is also to show two parts, right? One, it is complex. It is not one player or one idea in the market. There are multiple stuff which is happening around the same time. So therefore, the business model needs to be very minute in terms of looking at specific organization idea, but also looking at the big picture, looking at what is it that the market is trending towards, for example, right? So, and one of the things which you will hear quite a lot in this space is pivoting. A lot of startups or startup founders start with a thing, and when they move on, they pivot into something else, right? Their idea is the idea is to make sure that they move with the market. So if there is an entirely different need, or if there is a very different or a disruption or a headwind which is coming, then they move in towards making sure that their company still stays relevant, right? So the whole business model, of course, one of the things which is the market research. Now, one of the things about market research, for example, is considered as a domain of the big conglomerates and corporates. That's not entirely true. A lot of startups can do meaningful research with limited resources that they have, multiple mechanisms, either themselves or through a paid research firm, but they can do a very, very targeted research to figure out a little more about the market. So they're not purely going by the founder's hypothesis, if you will. So there is an element of market research that needs to be done. Again, for people who are delving into this, I would stress upon this, figure out a way to collect information from the market. This could be through interviews, through conversations that you're having with a diverse set of people who have a different viewpoint to yourselves, right? So getting all of that is extremely, extremely important. You heard of target market, target addressable market, TAM, and all of that, those terms, right? Why it is extremely important is because how you describe your market or how you calculate your market is also very important for your business model. Whether your target customer is 1 crore or 10 lakh or 1 lakh is also important. Sometimes people miscalculate. They either go very high, thinking pretty much everybody in the geography is their potential customer, maybe, but not in the initial phase, right? So need to figure out, be realistic in terms of what that initial market is, and so on and so forth. Of course, having an eye on the competition as well is important as well. Sorry, I'm using the word extremely quite often, but all of these are extremely important things, and which is why. But having an eye on the competition, or as I said earlier, where the market is moving and trending, is extremely important as well. Not necessarily that you decide to move in that direction, but it'd be good for you to know, you know where the market is trending, so that you can manage your business model or your storyline accordingly. And as I said, the art of the pivot, you'll see a lot of this pivot in a lot of the organizations at different stages, right? So even they pivot, like, for example, when the geographies, they're within A geography, going to B geography, they pivot. So their business model doesn't remain exactly the same, primarily because the demand of a different geography or of another geography could be slightly different, right? So it's not that they are changing 180 or 360 degrees, but just changing a small portion, pivoting a little bit, and making sure they are able to address it. So far, just to sum up, we spoke about the market need or finding the market need. We talk about passion in people. We spoke about business model. The last on the list is really the execution. Vinayak, if I could request you to move on to the next slide. I think on the execution, and I think all of you who are interested in this space would know very, very acutely, is that execution is extremely important. You may have a great idea, you may have great thoughts of how you're doing it, but if you don't do it well, then someone else will surpass, right? And apart from everything else, timing is extremely important as well from a startup ecosystem perspective. So execution is extremely important, and which is where I think the team or the people that I talked about earlier comes in very handy. If you've got people who are experts in their specific areas and you ask them to look at very specific activities or responsibilities, that's where they can be of substantial value. One of the things which I've highlighted here is cash flow. I basically talk about one, finance, the whole thing. And I'm not saying because I'm a banker, but in generally, I've seen a lot of startups fail because they have not managed their finances extremely well. And they potentially have let that sort of passed on to someone who potentially is not extremely equipped in doing that. So the whole financial management and the cash flow, it becomes very important in the whole execution game, ensuring that they have the right resources when they need it. Having access resources when you don't need it is not desirable. Similarly, when you need it and you have far lesser resources is also a problem. And when I mean resources, of course, cash and money is extremely important for a startup, because that will come out in very small numbers, but also all the other resources, right? So it's extremely important to be efficient in terms of your execution, so you know exactly what you're doing and you know exactly how you are doing that, and making sure you're making good use of the resources and the timings along with that. I'll take another pause. I'm conscious I've taken maybe slightly more than I should have, but these were the main attributes I wanted to sort of touch upon and make sure all of you sort of appreciate these. There are, of course, a lot of other examples or lessons. Even some of these are sort of mistakes to learn from, right? Mistakes of others, so that we're not reinventing the wheel, so to say, right? I'll take another pause to see if there are any questions. Else, I just have sort of two more slides in a way, just very high level.
Rupesh,
Okay.
I think you can move to the next slide.
All right. Thank you very much. Vinayak, if you could, please. This is one of the busy slides, which I apologize in the advance, and I'm not going through all of these 50, but I've sort of put it in a way that you can read it later. These are both lessons and mistakes. And this is something which is, again, predominantly a synthesis of last several years of startup economy, predominantly starting with Silicon Valley, but of course growing in the rest of the globe as well, right? So I'm not going to go through any of these in detail. This is pretty much part of it I've covered earlier, but this is something that I would request you, if you are interested in this ecosystem, is to sort of look at it. You would know most of these intuitively. None of these are out of the world ideas, but it's good to sort of take a print, put it on your desktop, so that you're making sure you're not committing those mistakes, or you're learning from the lessons which are out there. That's all I have to say on this specific slide. Next one, please, Vinayak. Next one, I just put in sort of a culmination of the whole startup journey. There are several models out there which tells you how you can sort of go about this whole process. This is one of the many. You can go onto internet sources and you'll figure out a lot of these models which are out there. Some of these are freely available in the marketplace. Some are specific to certain firms, etc. But you will see a plethora of information out there. Sometimes that is also a problem because there are way too many stuff. But broadly, you wouldn't see a lot of difference in terms of these models. They may use different words. They may use a slightly different approach. But broadly, the attributes that I've talked about earlier remains the same, more or less. So I've tried to simplify all of this this as one model and all of the other models into the slides that I touched upon earlier. The stuff that you see on your right hand side is really a culmination of all those things. I've added what else we shall add to the list. This is one for conversation. I'm happy either now or later when we get to that, right? I'll be happy to keep modifying this list, adding or removing or putting emphasis on something or removing emphasis on something else, right? That's something. And my last slide, Vinayak, if you could go in. This is a tough journey, but journey definitely for people who are passionate. And I close with my best wishes for anyone who wants to be in this space. It is having, despite all the challenges, all the headwinds, is an extremely exciting space. One thing that startups founders tell me very evidently is that how passionate and how adrenaline full this whole journey is, and they really enjoy every part of it. And I close with just wishing best of luck to everyone who gets into this as a startup founder, as an investor, or even just an ecosystem player to help everyone else. With that, I close. Thank you very much for patiently listening to me.
What an excellent presentation, Rupesh. That was really enlightening, and I could relate to a lot of things. In fact, everything that you mentioned today, I could very well relate to it because Confexco as an organization, we are a startup recognized company, and we've been growing our product from last 2.5 years, and we are slowly scaling up now. So I could, as a founder, I could relate to every single point that you made. Today, we are here to talk about a little bit more on BFSI. So if I have to ask you this, if you could elaborate maybe a specific example of an unmet customer need within the BFSI sector that a startup could address within maybe an innovative product or an innovative service, and so, throw an idea. I mean, I'm sure you hear a lot. So let's see. Ideas are out there, but coming from you, I think it will be like a guideline for people who want to get into BFSI.
Thank you, and of course, what you meant by the presentation is, hey, everything resonated with you, and none of this was new. I agree. There isn't any new ingredient that I discovered, but yeah, no, I think I agree with you that most of the founders sort of agree with this, and as I said, it's a synthesis of that. Coming to your question, I think on the BFSI space, one of the things which of course, we can't get away without talking about AI, right? But let's keep that aside for a second, and we'll come to that in a bit. I think one of the things which is extremely exciting in general from global market is cybersecurity. That seems to be taking a lot of attention. One, because this is a very evolving space. So even large organizations can't necessarily claim that they have sorted this out completely. So there are a lot of players in this and trying to work out a mechanism or work out a space which is not fulfilled, say, by large organizations in that space. So that is one. Now, when I say cyber security, I just don't necessarily mean in the crude sense, in whichever way, right? So there could be a product or a financial product which a company is doing. So let's say this is done by a big corporation without names, but you say, okay, what I could do as a startup is I have a great idea in terms of how I can secure this product from any possible attacks in the future and stuff like that. I can promise you a lot of organizations, banks included, will be all ears to that idea, because this is something which makes or breaks this industry. So there is a major does have all of that. That's one. I think the other space that I'm seeing a lot, primarily from an India perspective, is on loans and credit. Whether it is mini, micro, and all of that. That is the other space, which is attracting a lot of players, both startups and consumers, because the need for credit in this country is extremely high. Now, typically, the lending models that we have in this in the country and with large banks is very specific to a certain base of customers, right? Not necessarily very conducive to a startup environment, for example, right? So whether you're starting small or you're starting in different phases, right? So you take startup as a mechanism in terms of something that I spoke about earlier, right? Underserved market. So you pick up underserved and see what needs to be done. The other bit which works very well is technology. Again, something which large banks are not very good at. So something which a startup can do is figure out what is an underserved market and put a technology on top of it and figure out a way to reach out to a lot of without going into details. I'm working with with a startup which is in very unique model of gold loan, right? So that is very different than Muthoot, but this is something which they said, okay, this is an underserved market, right? Muthoot is probably the only player which does it, but they have a very different business model. So this is vying on a different business model as an example, right? So that is something, again, something that I'm working very closely with as an example. But there are a lot of it. I think InsurTech did pick up some steam, but for last few times, I've not seen a huge action in this space. I'm not honestly sure why. I've not done my research on this. I don't know if you have any view on that. But I would say those two or three things. Anything AI, as I did talk about earlier, is of course attracting attention everywhere in the globe across all the companies, big, small, or large. So anything which is to do with AI as a combination of your key product or offering is again something which has a lot of space in the market. The last thing which I would say, and I won't necessarily link it to BFSI, but probably anything on the climate tech, right? That is again something which, since the need is out there, and this will only get acute as we go about, right? So this isn't going to get slower. It's going to attract a lot of attention and a lot of focus from the regulators, governments worldwide, and there will be far more stringent action on these sort of stuff, right? So any organization or organizations or industry that focuses on that is likely to be successful in this space.
I think you're very well given us the idea of what could be tackled, or what kind of innovation or new solutions can be created to fill that gap or fill that need, that market need. We just have to figure out the right need. InsurTech is definitely one. I've had few conversations with the insurance sector. Specifically, if I have to add on to what you mentioned, just within the insurance sector, there's a lot of paper load. There's a lot of backlog in terms of number of pages, in terms of whether it's underwritten insurance policies or whether it's evaluating the right premium, or in terms of the manual task that needs to happen. If a technology is created to summarize that, maybe using AI, maybe using your OCRs, or reading those paper into digital format and then evaluating that. And there's so much that can happen in that front. And also within customer experience or customer's journey, AI is coming up as the forerunner right now, where a lot of people are saying my jobs are going to go because of AI is taking over. But I think that's still far ahead. So
just one more thing to add on this short. Again, I probably one of the things which one of the startups that I met a couple of months back, they're doing a very interesting work on some of the stuff. So we've all been maybe witness to that as a consumer of especially insurance product. Is sometimes you have an oversell situation, right? You speak to an agent, they oversell you certain promises, etc., what is done, and you never have time or patience to go through reams and reams of paper, right, to make sure that is correct or not. They are doing some work in terms of figuring out how that gap can be closed, both for the company and the consumer, in the sense that, hey, there is no oversell. There is a very clear understanding on both sides, because companies also struggle with this, that an agent oversells and then later it is a bad customer experience, and they struggle to sort of unwrap that, right? So they're doing some interesting work, and this is to do with the AI as well, and some of the sentiment analysis and stuff like that. But yeah, no, that was a good point, and I just reach out my memory on that.
Yeah, there's so much. I mean, when we talk about regulatory compliance barriers within the BFSI sector, compliance is something which is like a big shark within this industry, where you have to abide by any rule that comes across, and you have to learn it, you have to understand it and implement it, and then you have compliance officers and who make sure they're implemented. So I know somebody based out of Pune who's working on that aspect, and creating a tech product for compliance related with it, whether it's insurance or banking or any of within the finance industry.
We should connect on that offline later.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much. There's something while you were mentioning on your third slide about the market size. Understand your market and penetrate based on the size of the market, whether SOM or what is the achievable market size. I have a daughter who's in 5th grade, and they have a subject called global perspective. Now, I asked her what is global perspective. So her school started recently, and she had no idea. So yesterday she came to me and she said, "Now I know what is global perspective." So I asked her, "Okay, what is global perspective?" Interestingly, she said, "Anything around you, near you, is local. Anything in your city or state is your regional, and then anything outside that is global." So, and that is global perspective. I said, okay, so how? So I kept on probing more to see the understanding of from a child's perspective. What do they understand by global perspective? And this also applies to a startup or a founder. When you're trying to identify your market, see your product where it fits. Where does your target audience sits? Are they sitting within your vicinity? If you're say a pediatrician or a doctor, you will not market yourself in another country, right? So it's based on your product, you have to identify the market. So she has a very interesting take, and she said, like, our family is within this area, and then my aunt is in Canada, so she's global. And so it was interesting to have that conversation, that at such a young age, our education system is giving that knowledge to our kids, and then later on, when they go out in the world and face the challenges, I think they will be better equipped than we were, because I never got to know this in school. And as a founder, when I everything that comes across, I always try to see, okay, how do I implement that? How do I use that? How do I make it better for my audience? How do I impart that knowledge to my stakeholders, everyone who interacts with us? So that is something that is interesting, that I could relate to. And I'm sure everyone who's listening to us right now has a perspective where they are looking at it. The same slide can be interpreted in hundreds of different ways, and everybody will have something or the other that they could take positively out of it. I have one more quick question that I wanted to ask you. For any startup, compliance is very important, and regulatory compliance is one of the barriers for innovation, is what we say always. Because the moment you want to innovate something, there is something that will prevent you. Okay, this is not allowed, this is against the normal systems. So how do you think it impacts the BFSI sector very specifically, where strict regulatory compliance is a barrier to innovation?
Well, that's a really great question, and it's sort of out there, right? You could agree on one or the other. My personal view is regulation doesn't necessarily stifle innovation, right? There are certain regulatory paradigms are there, or the blocks are there, primarily to avoid anyone going on to the wrong side in terms of illegal or whatever stuff you call it, right? I think having those guardrails is important, in the sense that any organization, startup, for sure, when they're starting, they don't want to delve into something which will be on the other side of the law. They're potentially too small when they start and nobody notices. But as a startup, you don't want to be caught on the wrong side if you've not taken care of the regulation front. However, there are certain regulations which could be market or scenario driven, right? Like, for example, before the advent of technology, right, there is only so much concern or so much that you could do from a technology basis, right? You had to be in person to do a lot of the stuff and things like that. Now those will of course will be pushed in terms of northwards in making sure they are challenged day in and day out, right? There was a time when you can't do your banking, for example, on the phone, right? So of course the regulation won't allow it. You've got to be in person and stuff like that. Gradually some services got opened to online or whatever, and then later on more. So you would see those envelopes being pushed. So I would categorize those regulations in two parts. One, which potentially stops any firm from doing which they should not do in the interest of the consumer. So that is one. I think that is sacrosanct. We shouldn't play with it. Anything which is other than this, right? Is it just that it's a new idea, a fresh perspective, and has not been explored? There's no harm exploring that and having conversations. It'll be a very, very slow moving bit. But some of the things which I've seen in startups, especially, and this is a good mantra for when you're looking for exit, right? Whether you look at cybersecurity and all of, or even on regulation front, right? At some point in time, you'll have a very, very nice exit if you've done some good work on it. Is, for example, if you do a lot of the startups, even before facial recognition became a very in thing in all our devices and day to day, they did a lot of pre-work on facial recognition, which helps, which was of course not necessarily permissible by regulation, but they did all of the work because this isn't something which is going on the other side, as I told you, right? So what I would recommend for you as a startup is divide the regulation in two parts. One, which is impacting the customer in a negative sense. Don't touch on it. Don't push on those boundaries, but pick up the other ones which you think are because just the time, right? Tide of time, and push those envelopes in terms of building your technology, getting ready for future. So a regulator may be saying no for it today just because they don't know it, right? But 2 years later, because the market opens up, this could be even globally, right? They've figured out, hey, some of this happened in any of the other country, and the regulator in our own country becomes more open to idea, and then you are sort of ready for it. You have an early start because you've done all of the pre-work associated with that. So that's how I would bifurcate those two, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. That I think we are running out of time, but we have one question from one of our attendees, Hitesh. His question is: problem with AI is if you don't have efficient processes, and you may not have efficient results. So, what are your views to correct it?
Well, I'm not a technologist. Not that I can give you a very insightful answer to that, but I do agree that if you deploy an AI and if you do not have a very efficient backend approach to it, right? Whether how you pick up even LLMs or what is the source of it, how do you take it further? Yes, the AI may not necessarily be very successful or pervasive in the space. Again, I'm not a technologist, so I can't give you a very, very technical answer to that, Hitesh. My apologies, but I don't want to sort of give you an answer just for the sake of giving an answer, and not someone that who can really provide you a lot of insights on that. But in general, all of us have come across a lot of AI or any of the other technology tools which are not as efficient, and therefore, it's not easy to see that they go out of the market very, very soon, right? AI would be same. I think AI would be same in the sense that all AI products would not be same or in terms of similar efficiency and output, right? Some would be better than others, and they would therefore sort of continue, and others would fall behind and then gradually cease to exist, in my view.
Thank you so much for that, Rupesh. And I think with that, we would like to thank you for your time and your expertise and your knowledge that you shared with us today. This recording will be available in the future as well. And whoever is watching us, at a later stage, please do connect with Rupesh on his LinkedIn profile, which will be mentioned in the link below. And we look forward to hosting you again, Rupesh. Thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure talking to you. I really got a lot of insights, and I'm sure the audience did as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Bye-bye.